The night the dragon hatchling found the human janitor, the city of Eldoria was wrapped in cold rain and silence, the kind that made the towering silver towers feel like ghosts watching from the fog. Far below those towers, where the polished marble of the Royal Academy of Magic met the cracked stone of the old maintenance corridors, a man named Daniel worked quietly with a mop and bucket. Daniel had never been a hero, a wizard, or anything special. He was simply the Academy's night janitor, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and rough hands who spent his nights cleaning floors that powerful students walked across without even noticing him. For 20 years he had worked there, polishing the halls where future heroes studied magic and strategy. He had seen arrogant nobles, gifted prodigies, and ambitious warriors pass through the academy gates, but none of them ever spoke to the janitor except to complain about a wet floor sign. Daniel didn't mind much. He preferred quiet anyway. But that night, while he was cleaning the long corridor near the abandoned East Wing, he heard a faint scratching sound behind a stack of broken crates. At first he thought it was a rat. The academy had plenty of them hiding in the old maintenance tunnels. But when the scratching turned into a weak, trembling chirp, Daniel slowly set down his mop and walked toward the crates. "Hello?" he said softly, crouching down. The chirp came again, louder this time. Daniel moved the top crate aside, and what he saw made him freeze completely. Curled in the darkness was a tiny dragon hatchling. Its scales were the color of burning copper, its wings still too small to lift its body, and its bright golden eyes looked at Daniel with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Dragons were not supposed to exist inside the academy. In fact, dragons had nearly vanished from the world decades ago after the Great Dragon War. The few that remained were said to live deep in forbidden mountains, far away from human cities. Yet here one was shivering and injured behind a pile of old boxes. Daniel stared for several seconds, wondering if he was hallucinating from exhaustion. Then the hatchling slowly crawled forward, dragging one wing behind it. When it reached Daniel's boot, it looked up and spoke in a small, trembling voice that sounded more like a child than a monster. "Please, human, may I hide here?" Daniel blinked in shock. Dragons were supposed to be intelligent, but hearing one speak directly to him was something else entirely. The hatchling's voice was weak, and Daniel could see a deep burn mark across its wing. Someone had hurt it badly. "Who did this to you?" Daniel asked quietly. The hatchling lowered its head. "Hunters. They took my family. I escaped." For a moment Daniel simply sat there, staring at the tiny creature trembling in the shadows. Helping it would be dangerous. If the Academy Masters discovered a dragon hidden in the building, they would capture it immediately. Dragons were too valuable, too powerful, and too rare to simply let wander free. Yet when Daniel looked at the hatchling's frightened eyes, he didn't see a monster. He saw a lost child. With a long sigh, Daniel carefully took off his worn maintenance coat and wrapped it around the tiny dragon. "All right," he muttered. "You can hide. But we have to be quiet." The hatchling's golden eyes widened with surprise and relief. "Thank you, human." Daniel lifted the small dragon gently and looked around the empty corridor. If anyone saw him carrying it, he would be fired instantly or worse. But there was one place inside the academy no one ever visited anymore. The old storage basement beneath the maintenance wing. Slowly, carefully, Daniel carried the hatchling down the narrow stone stairs to the basement, where broken furniture, rusted tools, and forgotten crates filled the dusty room. It wasn't comfortable, but it was hidden. Daniel set the hatchling down on an old blanket and examined its injured wing. The burn mark looked like it came from magic fire, probably used by dragon hunters. "This will hurt a little," Daniel warned as he cleaned the wound with water from his bucket and wrapped it with cloth strips. The hatchling winced but didn't complain. After a moment it looked up again. "Why are you helping me?" it asked. Daniel leaned back against a crate and shrugged. "Because someone should." The hatchling studied him for a long moment before curling its small body into the blanket. "My name is Ember," it said softly. Daniel smiled a little. "Ember, huh? I'm Daniel." For the first time since Daniel had started working at the academy 20 years ago, he realized something strange. His quiet, ordinary life had just changed forever. because hidden beneath the Royal Academy of Magic, a human janitor had just become the protector of the last creature anyone expected to find there. A dragon hatchling that the entire world believed no longer existed. And neither of them had any idea that this small act of kindness would soon shake the entire kingdom. The following morning, the Royal Academy of Magic buzzed with its usual rhythm of ambition and arrogance. But beneath the polished marble floors and echoing lecture halls, Daniel the janitor moved through the corridors with a secret that could change the fate of the entire kingdom. Every time a student walked past him or a professor glanced in his direction, Daniel felt his heart jump nervously in his chest, because hidden deep in the forgotten basement beneath the maintenance wing was something the Academy would never allow to remain free: a dragon hatchling named Ember. Throughout the day, Daniel forced himself to work normally, pushing his mop along the long stone hallways, while students in elegant uniforms practiced spells and argued about magical theory. None of them noticed the quiet janitor, just as they never had before, but Daniel's thoughts kept drifting back to the basement. Ember had been badly injured, and Daniel worried about leaving the small dragon alone for too long. Dragons were supposed to be powerful creatures, but Ember had looked so fragile curled inside that old blanket, like a lost child hiding from the world. Finally, when evening came and the academy halls began to empty, Daniel carried a small bag of leftover food he had quietly taken from the staff kitchen and made his way back toward the maintenance stairs. He glanced carefully around the corridor before opening the hidden basement door and stepping inside. "Ember," he called quietly. For a moment there was silence. Then a small copper-colored head popped up from behind the crates, and two glowing golden eyes lit up the darkness. "Daniel," Ember chirped excitedly, hopping forward with slightly better balance than the night before. Daniel felt a wave of relief when he saw that the hatchling was standing more steadily. "Looks like you're feeling better," he said as he knelt down and opened the food bag. Ember sniffed the bread and cooked meat curiously before nibbling at it with small sharp teeth. "Human food is strange," the dragon said between bites. Daniel chuckled softly. "You're lucky it's all I could get." As Ember ate, Daniel examined the injured wing again. The bandage had held, and the burn mark looked slightly less angry than before. "It will heal," Ember said quietly. "Dragon bodies recover quickly." Daniel nodded but still looked worried. "Good, because if anyone finds you before that wing works again, we'll both be in serious trouble." Ember tilted its head. "Why?" Daniel sighed and sat down against a crate. "Because people fear dragons. After the Great Dragon War, most kingdoms decided dragons were too dangerous to exist near humans. If the Academy discovers you, they won't kill you, but they won't let you be free either. They'll cage you, study you, maybe even train you as a weapon." Ember stopped chewing. The little dragon lowered its head slowly. "That is what the hunters wanted too," it whispered. For a moment the basement was silent except for the distant echo of footsteps above them. Then Ember looked up again. "Daniel, why are humans afraid of us?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Honestly, most people have never even seen a dragon. They just remember old stories about the war. When people fear something they don't understand, they usually try to control it." Ember considered this quietly before curling its tail around its small body. "My mother said humans were unpredictable, but she also said some humans had kind hearts." Daniel smiled faintly. "Your mother sounds smart." The dragon hatchling seemed comforted by that, but their peaceful moment didn't last long. Suddenly, a loud bell rang through the academy above them, echoing down the basement stairwell. Daniel stiffened. That wasn't a normal class bell. It was the academy's alert bell. Ember's golden eyes widened. "What is that?" Daniel stood quickly and moved toward the stairs, listening carefully. Above them he could hear hurried footsteps and distant voices shouting orders. Something serious was happening. After a few seconds Daniel returned, his face pale. "Dragon hunters," he said quietly. Ember froze. "They're here." Daniel nodded grimly. "I heard the guards talking earlier today. A group of hunters arrived at the city gates this afternoon. They claim a dragon hatchling escaped them last night." Ember's small body trembled. The hunters were closer than either of them had expected. Daniel looked down at the frightened hatchling and felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. Hiding Ember in the basement might have worked for a few days, but if professional dragon hunters were now searching the academy, it wouldn't stay secret for long. Ember looked up at him again with that same desperate hope it had shown the night before. "Will you send me away?" it asked softly. Daniel stared at the small dragon for a long moment. Logically, sending Ember away might save him from losing his job or worse. A janitor hiding a dragon from royal hunters could easily be accused of treason. But when Daniel thought about pushing the injured hatchling back into the dangerous city streets alone, something inside him refused. He let out a slow breath and shook his head. "No," he said firmly. Ember blinked in surprise. "Then what will we do?" Daniel glanced toward the dark basement tunnels that stretched far beyond the storage room. Ancient passages built when the academy was first constructed centuries ago. Most people believed those tunnels had collapsed or been sealed long ago, but Daniel knew better. After 20 years of maintenance work, he had explored places no student or professor even knew existed. A slow, determined smile appeared on his face. "If the hunters want to search the academy," Daniel said quietly, "then we'll make sure they never find the right places to look." Ember's golden eyes glowed with cautious hope, and somewhere above them, the dragon hunters had already begun their search. That night, the Royal Academy of Magic felt different, tense and restless. As guards and dragon hunters moved through its once peaceful halls with lanterns and enchanted trackers, searching every classroom, tower, and courtyard for the creature they believed had slipped into the city. Students whispered nervously behind closed doors, professors argued with the hunters about jurisdiction, and the entire academy buzzed with unease. But far below the marble floors, deep inside the forgotten tunnels beneath the maintenance wing, Daniel guided Ember through a narrow stone passage that almost no one alive remembered existed. The tunnel was cold, dusty, and dimly lit by the small lantern Daniel carried, but it stretched far beyond the basement storage room into parts of the academy built centuries earlier when the kingdom had first founded the school. Daniel had discovered the tunnels years ago while repairing old pipes, and over time he had explored them out of simple curiosity. At the time, he had never imagined that one day those hidden paths might save a dragon's life. Ember walked beside him carefully, its injured wings still wrapped but slowly healing. The hatchling looked around with fascination at the ancient stone walls carved with faded runes. "These tunnels are old," Ember whispered. Daniel nodded. "Older than the academy itself, I think. Most people believe they collapsed long ago." He smiled slightly. "Turns out janitors learn a lot of secrets nobody else cares about." Ember seemed impressed, but the small dragon still looked nervous. "Will the hunters find us?" it asked quietly. Daniel shook his head. "Not down here. Their magic trackers search open areas and known rooms. These tunnels were sealed off in official records 100 years ago. To them, this place doesn't exist." Ember relaxed a little and continued walking beside him. As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Daniel suddenly noticed something strange. The air felt warmer, and faint glowing symbols appeared on the stone walls ahead of them. "That wasn't here before," Daniel muttered, stepping closer. The runes were ancient, far older than the academy, and they pulsed faintly with golden light as Ember approached. The hatchling stopped suddenly, staring at the glowing symbols with wide eyes. "These are dragon runes," Ember said softly. Daniel blinked in surprise. "Dragon runes? Why would those be under the academy?" Ember walked closer to the wall and gently touched one of the glowing markings with its claw. The moment it did, the entire tunnel vibrated softly, and the runes began to glow brighter. Daniel quickly grabbed the lantern, worried something dangerous might happen, but instead the stone wall slowly shifted with a deep grinding sound. Dust fell from the ceiling as a hidden doorway opened, revealing a massive underground chamber beyond the tunnel. Daniel's jaw dropped. "I've worked here 20 years, he whispered, "and I never knew this was here." The chamber was enormous, easily the size of the academy's main hall, with tall stone pillars supporting the ceiling and ancient dragon symbols carved into every surface. At the center of the room stood a circular platform made of black stone, glowing faintly with the same golden runes Ember had touched. The entire chamber felt powerful, ancient, and completely hidden from the world above. Ember slowly stepped into the chamber, its golden eyes shining with recognition. "This is a dragon sanctuary," the hatchling said quietly. "Long ago, dragons and humans worked together. Places like this were built so dragons could rest safely near human cities." Daniel looked around in disbelief. All the stories he had heard growing up claimed dragons had always been enemies of mankind. Yet this hidden sanctuary suggested a very different past. "So humans and dragons used to trust each other?" he asked. Ember nodded slowly. "Yes, before the war." Daniel stepped onto the circular platform and examined the glowing runes carefully. "If this place was built to protect dragons," he said thoughtfully, "then maybe it can hide you from the hunters." Ember walked beside him and looked at the center of the platform. There, carved into the stone, was a large dragon crest surrounded by complex runic patterns. As Ember placed one claw on the crest, the entire chamber lit up with warm golden light. The runes along the walls flared brightly, and a low hum filled the air like the sound of distant thunder. Daniel stepped back in shock. "Ember, what did you do?" The hatchling looked just as surprised. "I don't know." Suddenly a deep voice echoed through the chamber, ancient and powerful, yet calm. "Dragon blood has returned." Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Did that room just talk? The glowing runes shifted, forming new patterns across the walls as the voice continued. "This sanctuary recognizes the presence of a dragon heir." Ember's wings twitched. "Heir?" Daniel frowned, glancing down at the small hatchling. "Ember, is there something you didn't tell me about your family?" The dragon hesitated before speaking softly. "My mother was the last queen of the Ember Dragons." Daniel stared at the tiny hatchling in complete disbelief. The small creature he had found trembling behind crates wasn't just any dragon. Ember was royalty, and now the ancient sanctuary had awakened because of it. Before Daniel could respond, a loud distant crash echoed through the tunnels behind them. The hunters had reached the basement level. Ember looked toward the tunnel entrance nervously. Daniel clenched his jaw. The hunters were getting closer. But now things had changed. Because hidden beneath the academy was an ancient dragon sanctuary, and the hunters had no idea they were about to walk into something far older and far more powerful than they could imagine. The sound of boots echoing through the tunnels grew louder with every passing second, and Daniel knew the dragon hunters were closer than ever before. Dust drifted from the ceiling as distant voices shouted commands somewhere behind the winding passages, their lanterns casting flickering shadows along the ancient stone. In the glowing sanctuary chamber, the golden runes continued to pulse softly around Ember, who stood at the center of the circular platform looking both frightened and strangely powerful at the same time. Daniel glanced back toward the dark tunnel entrance and then at the small dragon beside him. Just 2 days earlier, he had been nothing more than a quiet janitor cleaning empty hallways, but now he was standing in a hidden dragon sanctuary with the last heir of an ancient dragon kingdom, while professional hunters searched for them only a few corridors away. "Well," Daniel muttered nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. This escalated quickly. Ember looked up at him, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the chamber's light. "Daniel, if they find me, they will take me away." The fear in her voice was clear, but beneath it was something else now, a growing strength awakened by the sanctuary. Daniel crouched beside her and spoke firmly. "They won't." Ember blinked. "How can you be sure?" Daniel gave a small smile. "Because they're looking for a frightened hatchling hiding in the dark." He gestured around the glowing chamber. "What they're actually about to find is a dragon queen." Ember looked down at the glowing crest beneath her claws, uncertain but determined. At that exact moment, several bright lantern lights appeared at the far end of the tunnel, and heavy footsteps rushed closer. The hunters had reached the chamber entrance. A group of armored men stepped into view, their dark cloaks marked with the silver insignia of the Royal Dragon Hunter Guild. Their leader, a tall man with a scar across his face, raised his enchanted spear as his eyes fell on Ember standing on the glowing platform. "There it is," he said coldly. "The escaped hatchling." The hunters slowly moved into the chamber, surrounding the platform while staring at the ancient runes glowing across the walls. One of them whispered nervously, "Captain, this place feels wrong." But the scarred leader ignored the warning. "Capture the dragon," he ordered. "Alive if possible." Two hunters stepped forward with glowing chains designed to bind magical creatures. Ember flinched slightly, her wings tightening against her body, but Daniel stepped in front of her without hesitation. "You're not taking her," he said firmly. The hunters looked confused for a moment before the captain laughed. "You're the janitor," he said, recognizing Daniel from the academy halls. "Step aside. This is official guild business." Daniel shook his head. "No," the captain's smile disappeared. "Then you're interfering with royal authority." Daniel shrugged calmly. "Maybe." Behind him, Ember looked up at the glowing runes around the chamber. Something deep inside her mind stirred, like a memory passed down through generations of dragons. The sanctuary was responding to her presence, waiting for her command. The captain lifted his spear again. "Last chance, janitor." Daniel didn't move. For a long moment, the chamber was silent except for the low hum of the ancient runes. Then Ember stepped forward onto the center of the platform. Her small body straightened, and the golden light surrounding the chamber suddenly intensified. The hunters froze as the runes across the walls flared like miniature suns. Ember's voice echoed through the chamber, no longer weak or frightened but strong and clear. "This sanctuary belongs to the dragons." The moment she spoke, the glowing symbols across the floor expanded outward in a brilliant wave of light. The hunters stumbled back as the ancient magic activated. Massive stone pillars shifted, and a shimmering barrier of golden energy formed around the platform where Daniel and Ember stood. The captain tried to push forward, but the barrier threw him backward with surprising force. "What is this?" one hunter shouted in panic. Daniel looked just as shocked as the hunters, but he couldn't help smiling a little. Ember had activated the sanctuary. The ancient dragon runes weren't just decorations. They were defenses designed centuries ago to protect dragons from exactly this kind of threat. Ember looked down at the hunters with growing confidence. "Leave," she commanded. The golden barrier pulsed again, sending a powerful wave of magical energy through the chamber. The hunters staggered backward toward the tunnel entrance, their enchanted weapons flickering uselessly in the overwhelming ancient magic. The scarred captain glared at Ember with frustration but finally stepped back. "This isn't over," he warned before retreating with the others into the dark tunnels. Within seconds, the chamber fell silent again. The glowing barrier slowly faded, and the runes dimmed to a gentle golden glow. Daniel let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Remind me," he said, "never to underestimate a baby dragon again." Ember blinked, the powerful glow in her eyes slowly fading back to normal. She looked at Daniel nervously. Did I do something wrong?" Daniel laughed softly and patted her gently on the head. "No, Ember." He glanced around the ancient sanctuary, now fully awakened. "I think you just saved both of us." Ember looked around the chamber, realizing that the sanctuary had recognized her as its rightful guardian. The place was no longer just a hidden ruin. It was her home now. She looked back at Daniel with gratitude. "You helped me when I had nothing," she said quietly. Daniel shrugged with a warm smile. "That's what friends do." Above them, the academy continued its restless search, unaware that deep beneath its foundations a dragon queen had awakened and an ordinary janitor had unknowingly become the protector of something far greater than himself. And although the hunters had retreated for now, one thing had become very clear. After the night a lost dragon hatchling asked a human janitor for shelter, nothing in the kingdom would ever be the same again. Dragon. The morning after the hunters fled the ancient sanctuary, the Royal Academy of Magic woke to rumors that spread faster than wildfire through its towering halls. Students whispered about mysterious golden light seen beneath the academy during the night. Guards argued about magical barriers they could not explain, and the Dragon Hunter Guild reported that the creature they had been tracking had somehow vanished completely. But none of them knew the truth, that deep beneath their feet, inside a sanctuary older than the academy itself, A young dragon queen had awakened under the protection of a quiet human janitor who had never intended to become part of history. Daniel sat on an old stone step near the edge of the glowing platform, rubbing his tired eyes while Ember explored the chamber with growing curiosity. The sanctuary had changed since the night before. The runes along the walls now glowed softly all the time, and faint streams of warm air flowed through hidden vents in the ceiling, making the ancient chamber feel alive again after centuries of silence. Ember walked along one of the pillars, gently tracing the dragon symbols carved into the stone with her claw. "These carvings tell stories," she said thoughtfully. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You can read them?" Ember nodded slowly. "Not like human writing, but dragon runes carry memories." She looked at one large symbol glowing faintly above the platform. This sanctuary was built when dragons and humans protected the kingdom together. Daniel leaned back against the wall, thinking about that. Funny how no one upstairs remembers that part of history. Ember tilted her head. Why would humans forget something like that? Daniel gave a small sigh. Because wars change stories. After the Great Dragon War, people probably stopped telling the parts where dragons were allies. Ember seemed sad at that idea, but before she could respond, a distant sound echoed through the tunnels again. Footsteps. Daniel instantly stood up. "Stay here," he whispered. Ember tensed nervously. More hunters. Daniel moved quietly toward the tunnel entrance and peeked around the corner. To his surprise, the person approaching wasn't a hunter at all. It was a young academy student wearing the blue uniform of the advanced magic class. She held a lantern in one hand and a small glowing crystal in the other as she cautiously followed the tunnel path. Daniel frowned. Students were never supposed to come down here. The girl stopped when she noticed the faint golden light coming from the sanctuary chamber ahead. "I knew it," she whispered to herself. "There really is something down here." Daniel stepped out of the shadows before she could go any farther. "This area is restricted," he said firmly. The girl nearly dropped her lantern in shock. "Ah, you scared me." She blinked in confusion when she recognized him. "Wait, you're the janitor." Daniel crossed his arms. "That's right. And this tunnel isn't part of the academy tour." The student hesitated for a moment, then raised the glowing crystal in her hand. "My detection spell led me here," she explained. "There was a huge surge of ancient magic last night." She glanced toward the glowing chamber behind Daniel. "Something powerful is hidden down there." Daniel opened his mouth to deny it, but before he could speak, Ember slowly peeked out from behind the stone pillar inside the sanctuary. The golden light reflected off her copper scales, making the small dragon impossible to miss. The student's eyes widened in complete shock. That's a dragon." For several seconds, no one spoke. Then, instead of screaming or running away, the student lowered her crystal and stared at Ember with amazement. "I thought they were extinct," she whispered. Daniel sighed quietly. So much for keeping Ember completely secret. But the girl's reaction didn't seem hostile. She looked curious more than anything else. Ember slowly walked closer, studying the human carefully. "You are not afraid," the dragon said. The student blinked again. "You can talk?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Great. Now two people know." The girl looked between Daniel and Ember, trying to process what she was seeing. Finally, she spoke carefully. "My name is Clara," she said. "And if the Dragon Hunter Guild finds out about this, they will come back with an army." Daniel nodded. "Trust me, we know." Clara looked around the ancient sanctuary, her eyes filled with wonder. "This place is incredible. The magic here is older than anything taught at the academy." Ember watched her closely before asking, "Will you tell the hunters?" Clara shook her head immediately. "No," she looked back at Daniel with a serious expression. "But hiding a dragon queen beneath the academy isn't going to stay a secret forever." Daniel frowned. "Dragon queen?" Clara asked. Daniel pointed toward Ember. "Apparently she's the heir to the Ember Dragons." Clara's jaw dropped again. "You're serious?" Ember nodded quietly. The young student looked from the glowing runes on the walls to the small dragon standing proudly in the center of the sanctuary. Slowly, A determined smile appeared on her face. "Then the hunters aren't the only ones who will be interested," she said. Daniel crossed his arms suspiciously. "What's that supposed to mean?" Clara held up the glowing crystal again, but this time it projected a faint magical map of the kingdom into the air. Several distant points of light appeared across the mountains beyond the city. "Because according to the ancient records," Clara said softly, "there may still be other dragon sanctuaries hidden across the kingdom." Ember's golden eyes lit up with hope. Daniel stared at the glowing map in disbelief. If Clara was right, then Ember might not be the last dragon alone in the world after all. But finding those sanctuaries would mean leaving the safety of the academy and facing dangers far greater than dragon hunters. And as Daniel looked at the map floating in the air, he realized something that made him shake his head with a tired laugh. His quiet life as a janitor was officially over. Because now, whether he liked it or not, he had just joined the beginning of a journey that might bring dragons back to the world again. Dragon,